Hello, BookTube. I've got a tag for you on this torrid Tag Wednesday. It's a boiling hot day here in Boston, 95 degrees Fahrenheit with commensurate humidity. The air is febrile. There is definitely a feel in the background, underneath the little half-hearted breezes, that something is coming, that a change is coming. But boy, oh boy, you don't feel it when you're walking around. It is boiling hot outside. I've had all of the windows closed here. Every once in a while, I will let the AC units run for a little while to sort of cool everything off just a bit. But there's no real getting around heat like this. It gets in everywhere. And it changes the calculus of every day. I used to hate that changed calculus. I used to be incapable of getting comfortable, even in AC, when the temperature was this hot. I have changed. I am now Jerry Seinfeld's parents. I live in Florida, but I don't turn on the air conditioning. I have changed. I am always cold. So much so that I hardly even complain about it anymore. I just sort of let it go. I'm always cold. I'm always hungry. And the music is always too loud. But these last couple of days, I have not been cold at all. The only times that I've been uncomfortable is when I have run the AC unit in order to protect Frida. See, she's panting right now. She gets hot. She's very vulnerable to the heat. She wilts. We had a very good morning because I gave her a bath. And that has made her feel much better. You know, I scrubbed her skin, I scrubbed her hair, I scrubbed her face, and then toweled her all off, and she cooled off and dried off in front of a floor fan. So that felt wonderful, but there's no escaping heat like this in the middle of the day. So I'm gonna do a tag for you and then bring us both back into the AC unit for an hour. It's pretty much what you have to do. You have to treat it like a swimming pool. So you're sitting there on the side of the swimming pool and you're reading until you get a little too hot. Then you put your book down and you dive in for a while to cool off. That's pretty much what we have to do. But the tag today is the JFK Book Tag, which was created by very literary Kari, who warms my heart by being a JFK fan on BookTube. And I was tagged by Brian at Bookish. And it's a series of questions that are patterned after events and terms in JFK's life. And number one is Tenuvus and one more. Rose and Joe Sr. had a boat called Tenuvus to signify the 10 members of the Kennedy clan. With the birth of Ted, the family named another boat One More. What book with a large cast of characters would you recommend? And here, not straying far from the Kennedy theme, I would recommend The Patriarch by David Nassau, which is probably I think it's in an Orange Penguin trade paperback now. It would probably be in a used bookstore of yours. It's a big biography of Joe Kennedy, President Kennedy's father, who was for a brief and disastrous period ambassador of the court of St. James, but who was also an industrialist, made and lost greater fortunes than 99.9% of all Americans ever experienced in their lives, and led a fascinating life. He wasn't a nice guy. He's not a sympathetic character, but he led a fascinating and quintessentially American life. Nassau does a fantastic job. Then prompt number 2 is PT 109. What is your favorite book featuring a harrowing survival, rescue, or war story? PT 109 was a boat that John F. Kennedy was on during World War II that does epitomize harrowing survival, rescue, and a war story. Although he, later on in life, was curiously reluctant to tell that war story. He didn't like trotting it out to amuse the yokels, as he used to say. And for this, I'm going to, again, stick with a Kennedy book and just pick a book called PT 109, a book that sold a gajillion copies. It's by Robert Donovan. I could tell you stories about Robert Donovan and the composition of that book, but nevertheless, he makes it a thrilling narrative, and he doesn't stray that far from the facts. So then question number 3 is Addison's disease. What is your favorite book that deals with disease or the medical field? For me, this is Hans Zinsner's Rats, Lice, and History, about typhus. That manages, as you can tell from the title, to be much broader than that. I could have picked, Barry's book on the Great Pandemic, the flu pandemic, or Philip Ziegler wrote a terrific book on the Black Death. I consider it to be the best book ever written on the Black Death. But I've just recently reread Rats, Lice, and History, and I love it. I love how effortlessly erudite it is, so I'm going to choose that one. Then number 4 is Camelot. What real or imagined dynasty would you like to read more about? The first book that came to mind was Ishbel Ross's book, American Family, which came out 60 years ago, something like that. It was a story about the Taft family, the political Taft family from Ohio. that had all members of the family in all levels of the Ohio political machine, corrupt up to their eyeballs, most of them, and then famously reached the pinnacle of political ambition in America by having William Howard Taft become President of the United States. And then William Howard Taft achieved after that his foremost goal, which was to become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. But there was still a famous Taft in the family, Robert Taft, Mr. Republican. For a long time, if you'd said to any normal American on the street, name me a famous Taft, they'd have said him. They would have forgotten completely about William Howard Taft. And there are more details. The women in the story, for instance, are almost completely ignored in an American family. And 60 years is a long enough time to warrant this, right? I mean, the Kennedys get 10 books a year. They likewise had only one president in their family, and their generations, the power wielded, not anything less. You might say, well, Bobby Kennedy, if he hadn't been assassinated, but he was. You say John Kennedy was president, but also Edward Kennedy was a major force in the U.S. Senate for a long time. Well, so was Robert Taft. I naturally, when I read the question, I thought, okay, let's do a big generational book on the Taft family. I admit I'm partial to one particular Taft, but the stories are fantastic. And there's all sorts, I know this for a fact, I've seen it with my own eyes, there are all sorts of family archives and records that no historian has ever tapped. That's a shame. That's a real shame. But I also thought about something else here in terms of dynasties. Not one that's not quite as connected by blood as you would think, and that is what we call the Antonine dynasty in ancient Rome. Starting with the sort of placeholder old Emperor Nerva, then going through Trajan and Hadrian, and then into the Antonines proper, all the way to Commodus. That is a fantastic story. A concentrated period in which Rome reached its greatest physical extent, and also had fascinating things happen throughout it, including a pandemic that the best health authorities in the empire were not ready for. And it is very dramatic. There are all sorts of very high name recognition characters, Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor Hadrian. There are all sorts of fascinating side characters. It's a fairly well-documented period. I don't know why there hasn't been a 900-page book about the Antonines. I have no idea why that is, and recently, and I would like one. so I picked those two. Then prompt number five is High Hopes. Frank Sinatra re-recorded this song for Kennedy's 1960 presidential campaign. If you ran for office, what would your campaign song be? High Hopes is okay, I guess, but if I were going to run for office, I would not run for office, first of all. My gifts are not leadership. They are not leadership. When it comes to politics, when it comes to society, my gifts are not for leadership. My gifts run much more along the lines of being a very good sounding board for people whose gifts are for leadership. And I'm a pretty dab hand with a speech when I need to be. But if I were going to do it, of course, the song I would pick would be the signature song from the greatest musical ever written. I refer, of course, to High School Musical and to the song We're All in This Together. If I remember, I will leave a link to the absolutely inspirational video. Okay. Then prompt number 6 is We Choose to Go to the Moon. Name the last book you read that was set in space. I checked my recent reading log, and it is Boundless by Jack Campbell. This is an Admiral Blackjack Geary novel. I haven't read more than, I think, one of the previous books. I guess there are a lot of them, and he's a favorite with fans. And this is book 1 of something called The Lost Fleet Outbound. And as you can tell from all of that gobbledygook, I went into it expecting the worst. I expected that Jack Campbell would not care about me, effectively a new reader, that he wouldn't care about that this would all be fan service. And it wasn't. It wasn't at all. I did not feel lost at all in the course of this book. And it was very entertaining, fairly standard meat and potatoes military science fiction. Didn't really push any boundaries, not really anything that I didn't expect in the way of characters or character development, but very enjoyable. So kudos to Jack Campbell. This is the top layer on a very deep layer cake, and yet I did not feel that. That's fantastic. Then prompt number 7 is Coconut. The coconut shell JFK carved a rescue message on during the PTO-9 incident was encased in plastic and used as a paperweight in the Oval Office. Do you have any neat desk items or mementos? I don't have a desk anymore. And when I did, the last time I did, I moved. I have an old wooden desk I have used forever. I have done so much work at that desk. But then I moved it into, or somebody moved it into the kitchen because I just wasn't using it. For a while, last summer, I thought, well, it shouldn't just be a piece of furniture that you don't use for its intended purpose, or you just store stuff on. So clean it off, clear it out, and move it in here. Move it into this room and use it as a desk and see if you reacclimate. Frida is a friendly dog, but she's not clingy the way my, for instance, Basset Hound was. So she doesn't need to be on top of me. It's not like I'm going to be bothering her if I work at a desk, especially if I'm right nearby. So I set it up, and I worked at it for a bit, and it just didn't take. It just didn't take. There is no reason for me to work at a desk when my desk is right here. I have a laptop. I have a laptop computer that can go with me anywhere. It doesn't need to be on my desk. It has all of the reference volumes that would otherwise be the #1 desk mementos. It has everything that I need. And it can go anywhere that I need it to go. And it's much more comfortable. Frida might not be clingy, but she likes curling up next to me if I'm right there. I had the desk moved back into the kitchen. It is once again out there just storing stuff. I figured you're wasting space that could be used for a bookcase. So at the moment, I don't have a working desk, and I don't foresee repeating that experiment again. I don't think I will ever go back to having a desk, which is kind of weird considering how many decades I worked at that particular desk. Then question number 8 is scandal. What personal or political scandal would you like to read more about? My mind ranged widely, of course, but one thing that's always bugged me, a broader thing that's always bugged me, is how little appetite mainstream publishers in America seem to think there is in the American reading public for reading big biographies of English prime ministers. Almost never happens. Disraeli can maybe sell some books, but otherwise, no. That Roy Jenkins' book Gladstone did well in this country, but only because of a massive advertising campaign on the part of the publisher, which they would have done anyway because it was 1,000 pages long. So you've got to get behind a book like that, or you're going to eat your outlay. But virtually every prime minister has a fascinating enough story to warrant such a biography. And one that came to mind was Arthur Balfour. Not so much in terms of scandals that we know of, but I feel certain that there were oddities in his personal life, really deep, maybe even motivational oddities in his personal life that just have not been addressed by historians, not in the right way. I mean, if you have someone who knew you as a boy and a teenager, who shared intimate quarters with you when, in other words, both of you disrobed from time to time, who in later life referred to you as a hermaphrodite, I want to know about that. I want to know why that is. When you get to certain personal elements of Balfour's life, immediately a fog starts to envelop everything. And I'd like to, just the prurient side of me would like to know what is going on there. I'd love it if the book mostly ignored such subjects in favor of talking about his record or the vital issues of his day, but I'd also like to know about that. What was going on there with Balfour? Anyway, prompt number 9 is Peace Corps. What book made you a better person? Books don't make you a better person, but in the spirit of the question, I read a book called Drunk by Edward Slingerland, which is an alcoholic history of the human race. It's a history of the human race mapped onto the human race's permanent love affair with alcoholic consumption, with alcoholic beverages of all kinds. And it was a delight. And it could have been a delight in a very tub-thumping way, but it was a delight also in just how good it was, how smart it was. So I highly recommend it, and I guess it made me a better person, I suppose. I used to have a glass or two of wine every single night, or more than that, every night of my life. And I have long since stopped doing that. Long since. Don't do that, and don't drink anymore at all, except when I'm in company. Then I love it. Then there's no greater pleasure than drinking to excess in good company. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't do it. Not only because it feels a little odd, but also because it cuts into work. I can't read as well when I'm tipsy, and I can't write at all when I'm tipsy. So I just don't do it anymore. So the book had a vicarious element as well that I liked. Then question number 10, the writer of this tag saved the big one for last. Conspiracy. What are your thoughts on the Kennedy assassination? How much time do you have? I have read a lot of books on the Kennedy assassination. I've studied it. I think I'm comfortable in saying I know as much about it as anyone you'll ever meet. And ultimately, I have a lot to say on the subject. A certain booktuber, Ami, 8675209, wanted, we have a tentative plan to do a Zoom chat about the JFK assassination and maybe a couple of other assassinations. We just haven't got around to it yet. He's got a wife and kids and a family, so he's hard to pin down, but sooner or later it will happen. But ultimately, if you strip everything else away, I think the most likely explanation of what happened that day in Dealey Plaza is that Lee Harvey Oswald got lucky, which we hate, right? We hate that. Every aspect of the human psyche rebels against that. Lucky maybe in some trivial matter, but luck in a way that changed the course of American history. We don't want luck to play a role there, much less an extreme amount of luck, like snake eyes 5 times in a row kind of luck. We don't want that to be true. We want there to be some other explanation that isn't just one loner loser getting incredibly lucky. But the more you look at the evidence, the more you can be certain, as many conspiracy theorists have tried to get around, there is one statement about the JFK assassination that is incontrovertibly true, and that leads to all the other statements, which is that we know that Lee Harvey Oswald was in Dealey Plaza, and we know that he alone, of anyone that we can document in Dealey Plaza, was firing a weapon at the time. I hate to say it, and I love reading conspiracy theories. They make me think. But I think the ultimate explanation, unfortunately, is that the Warren Commission was essentially correct, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone and just got incredibly lucky. I could talk for 2 hours on the subject. If Ami and I ever actually do make a video, I will talk for 2 hours on the subject. But for now, that will be my summary. And that is it. That is the JFK book tag, and all that's left to do is tag people. And I want to tag Vin at Revenant Reads, even though I object to the fact that he burned his autopsy notes for the JFK autopsy. Don't think he should have done that. I want to tag Tom, LA Books, even though I disagree with his decision to release JFK's still warm body to White House people instead of keeping it at Bethesda, Maryland, where it could be analyzed by a local coroner as per Texas law. I want to tag Gina Stanier Books, even though I'm not quite sure that she has fully explained why she switched the caskets that JFK was in, from the one that left Parkland to the one that arrived in Washington. 2 different caskets. Why did Gina Stanier switch them? I don't really know. Perhaps she can explain that. Then I'll also tag Roz at Scally Gambling about the books, even though I'm not 100% sure what she was doing on the parade route, opening and closing at Black Umbrella. Seems like suspicious behavior. I want to tag a newcomer, Alfred, at the Book Cave, in case he does tags. I would love to know, what he was doing in the weeks leading up to the assassination. And of course, I want to tag Britta, because she has never fully explained what she was doing in Dealey Plaza that day. So there's guilt to go around here. That is the JFK book tag. I'll leave links to all the people that I tagged down below. Lots of fun. I would suggest presidential tags for everybody, but there's only a handful of them that anybody knows anything about, so I'll have to leave it at this. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.